Today I'll going to cover DNS topics. I'll try to cover all the topics, all the concept of DNS in this video. Um, this video will cover introduction of DNS, how DNS is installed in Windows Server 2008, what is the domain namespace, and what is DNS query, how DNS works, and what is the DNS forwarder, how DNS cache works, and the important topics: DNS zones, DNS records, and how do we do DNS zone transfers. Alright, so let's start with the DNS definition and what is the concept of DNS. DNS stands for Domain Name System. Before I jump on the more on the DNS, I would like to give you some introduction or some example of the DNS. Guys, we all have mobile and how mobile works. What is the functionality of mobile? You do not remember the all names of your friends. You cannot remember the numbers. You generally feed their numbers by their name. Whenever you want to contact them, you generally find out their number with their name, dial that number, and connection is established. So how it works? Generally, when you find someone numbers, like if you select your mobile, you'll just find out Abhishek Swami and you hit dial. You don't know my number, but that my request goes to the mobile exchange, establish the connection. They don't know my name. They generally converts my name into the mobile number, the numerical number, and the connection is established and communication will take place between you and me. So same DNS is also here. DNS is used to transfer domain name into an IP address. In the use network in your organization, transmission control protocol, internet protocol, and TCP/IP, many components are used to ensure that each TCP/IP host can communicate with other TCP/IP hosts and access network resources. So DNS is a distributed database that can serve as a foundation for hostname resolution with the hierarchical structure in your TCP network. Okay, it's fair enough for DNS. Alright, give me one more example. Oops, I'm sorry. If you would like to access www.microsoft.com, and the IP address of Microsoft.com is, for example, 192.168.7.180. Now your computer knows only numerical number, so when you send the request to your local DNS, it resolves the query. It converts that host name into the IP address and connection will be established. Okay, now introduction of DNS. We'll cover the DNS components, like what is DNS server. DNS server is nothing but your local server, and it could be any server who resolves your query. DNS database. DNS always resolve the query by searching the item, searching the information into his own database. DNS client. DNS client could be anyone. If you send the request to your local DNS, you will be DNS client. If your local DNS server will send the request to another DNS, your local DNS will become DNS client. Okay, see, this is the basic structure I have. Here is your local computer. You would like to, each day you access thousands of applications, thousands of websites. Now how does it work? When you send the request to www.facebook.com and connection established, but what exactly happened in the background? When you send the request to your DNS, DNS checks the entry in its own database. Hey, I do not have any entry in facebook.com, and I have no idea about the facebook.com. It simply sends the request to another domain controller. We'll look into this. I just want to show you the structure, how this query works here. Here we go. What is a domain namespace? This is the fully qualified domain here. Okay, and at the top it's a root domain. Now what is root domain? Root domain is a period, it's a com, it's a dot at the top level domain, and here in the this is the root, and the top level domain is .net, com, organization, edu, gov, and there are many. So you need to find out which purpose you are using your organization, which purpose you're going to establish your connection. Suppose if you are an IT infrastructure, if you work for an IT, basically you will go for .com. So if your domain, your local domain is global matrix, you have to register your domain with .com. The server is not going to find out global matrix until and unless you have registered your domain with .com domain. I would like to tell you here, this is server1.sales.hq.globalmetrics.com. This is the complete FQDN name. Now in the top level domain, this is .net. So if your subdomain is, or your local domain is North America or NA, so the connection will be North America .globalmetrics.net.com. or if your domain or your subdomain is HQ, so connection will be hq.globalmetrics.com. So this is the fully functional level of domain, and each domain has their own responsibility. Like root domain, there's only not one root domain, there are many root domains, and each root domain has their own purpose. They work in different environment. They only have information about top level domain. That if you ask root domain that I need globalmetrics.com, probably he will not resolve the query. It will but give you some sort of idea that I have information about .com. I can give you the IP address of .com. You can ask him for the further query. Now the same here, .net, .com is used for commercial organization, org is used for organization unit, edu is used for education organization unit, and many organization. It depends what type of structure of your environment is. So these are the top level domain. Now your request comes to the top level domain like com. If com has the information about global metrics, they will give you the IP address of global metrics, and if there's any subdomain or second level domain, it will route you to that domain. I guess it's quite enough to understand. Now we'll go ahead. Here we go. That is what I was wanted to show you, guys. Whatever I have taught you so far, if not understand, no problem. This structure will give you clear picture. When you enter www.google.com in your website, and the IP address of google.com is 173.194.38.179. If you know the IP address, you can direct enter. You do not require any DNS. You can see google.com page in front of you, but therefore we have structured DNS. Now in NT time, when you had before Windows Server 2008, the NT Millennium Server, we did not have DNS. We used to have the DNS cache. DNS cache is nothing but a host file, txt file, where we need to do the manual entry. I am not saying that today we are not using host file or LM host file. We do, but in such condition when your organization is not supporting that application and that request is not entered in your DNS server, so you have to manually entry. You have to do the manually entry in the DNS in the LM host file, so the connection can be established. Alright, so when you enter www.google.com, this is your computer, this is your client computer, this is you are sitting on this computer, and you send the request to www.google.com. This request, google.com request, comes to your DNS server. DNS what does, it finds the IP address, it finds the google.com in its own cache or in the database. DNS cache is nothing but a temporary entry in the DNS cache. If DNS is already resolved that query, it can be found in the DNS cache. If not, probably it'll send the request to another domain controller. So DNS, it will check the entry in the DNS cache or the DNS database. Hey, I have entry, I have resolved this query in past. I have the information about google.com, and it will send the request back to the DNS client. DNS client means send the request to you or your computer, and the connection will be established. But what happened when your local DNS, means this one, does not have any information? Your local DNS nothing but the DNS server which is already, which the entry of that DNS is made in your TCP IP. When you open your TCP IP properties, you'll see the DNS name, the primary DNS and the secondary DNS. This is your local DNS, from where you send the request and get the query resolved back. Okay. See, this is, I'll try to explain you in this mode. When your computer send the request to google.com to your local DNS finds the IP address. Yeah, I have DNS entry, I know about google.com. It will send the request back to you, and it will give you the IP address. Means you send the request with google.com, and it will resolve the IP address. It will resolve your host name into the IP address and give you the brief idea that this is the google.com, this is the IP address, and the computer can directly contact to the google.com and connection can be established. Now the DNS cache is remain only 1 hour, and your local DNS will give you the answer until and unless time is out. If time is out, then he'll need to make a new entry. Okay. What if your DNS or your local computer does not have any information about google.com? Therefore we have root domain, root hint domain, top level domain, and the second level domain. They all are work like a family. They will help each other, not the directly but the indirectly. Now your local DNS sends the request to the root domain, this computer, this server. You know what? Do you have information about www.google.com? It will check in its cache, but that root domain is only responsible for top level domain. It does not have any information about Google, but it does contain the information about com domain. It will send the request. It will say that, you know what, I do not have information about Google, but I do have information about com. So your root domain will send the request back to your DNS, local DNS, I have the information about Google, I have the information about com, and this is the IP address. Now your local domain will direct contact to com domain. This is top level domain. Hey com domain, do you have any information about google.com? It will check its records. It will find in its database. Yes, I do have information about google.com and the IP address of google.com. Before sending the request to its host, it will make entry in its cache, DNS cache. It sends the request. This is the IP address of google.com, and now you can make connection. Now your computer will be able to contact google.com. So the simple instruction and simple structure, like how this functionality work, how DNS works. Alright, now once again, if your computer is asking, I need the microsoft.com, the information of microsoft.com, what is the IP address of microsoft.com, your local DNS search in its own database. If it is find the information, it will directly give you the information about microsoft.com. In this situation, that becomes authoritative domain, authoritative DNS. It does contain the information about microsoft.com. Now whosoever resolves the query and sends the request back to the client, that becomes your authoritative domain. And non-authoritative domain is, I will find the information, but I do not have any information about microsoft.com, but I'll do search it and get back to you. This is non-authoritative. So this is the functionality of DNS, how DNS works. I'll cover the next topics, like how domain works, what is the domain, and DNS query, DNS records. All the topics I'll try to cover in next video. Thank you for watching and have a good day.